Welcome to CALI 2011. I'm glad to be back. I actually had to spend the last couple of years laying low back in North Carolina. Budget cuts, travel freezes, and all kinds of good stuff kept me away. Ironically enough, the last time I was at CALI in 2008 was Baltimore, and I did a presentation there called Mac Attack, but it's okay, they come in peace. And at that point, the increase in the number of Macs was just starting to kind of take off, and there were, like you all, I guess, there were a lot of folks curious about, support issues, compatibility issues, et cetera, et cetera. So I had fun doing that presentation, and was actually not planning on doing anything related to that this time, but you probably saw, if you're on the Technologist list, Elmer sent out a teaser saying, we kind of need somebody to do a Mac session. And I said, well, if you've got no takers, I'd be happy to do an update. And so here I am. My name is Doug Edmunds. I'm from UNC School of Law. I'm the Assistant Dean for IT. I've been there since 2007, and before that I was at the School of Education at Carolina. But back before that, when last in Milwaukee, one of those three crazy characters is actually me trying to look really cool and all rock star. And now that Cindy already outed me at the plenary this morning, I figured it wouldn't hurt. So yeah, I was in a band, and the last time we were in Milwaukee, last time I was in Milwaukee was probably, 1998 or 9. We played some divey little club, and I have very little recollection of how it went or where I was at the time. But alas, then I got a real job and started having kids and got increasingly into the real world, and I'm having as much fun now as I was back then, just in different ways. So, but speaking of jobs, so I thought I'd try to go with the gray and black. I don't quite have his look about me today, but anyway, I'd need to lose a little bit more hair, I guess. But so at this point, I really do think that's a good way to start. In 2008, there were a lot of folks saying, well, I'm really leery of supporting Macs, and, the legal field is not really dominated by Macs, and lawyers themselves aren't going to use Macs really much. And my associate dean for academic affairs at that time, who wielded quite a bit of power in the school, she'd been there a long time, and I got along great with her. She's a wonderful lady who actually does copyright law and internet law and things like that. She was very adverse to letting Carolina law students come with MacBooks, but we didn't have a laptop requirement or a laptop rule. And when I got there in 2007, I was coming from years of being at the School of Ed where Macs were predominant, actually. And so I thought, why are we trying to call the shots here, and why are we so afraid of letting students show up with laptops or Mac laptops? So, but at that time, maybe resistance didn't feel so futile. Now I think it does. According to Deutsche Bank and an IDC study done last year, this is actually from June of 2010, if you include iPads, Apple does now have a third in portable computer market share, and that's just vendor-based. So I'm talking, they're now past Asus and Lenovo and Dell. I think the only two that are still outselling them are HP, interestingly, and Acer. So sort of the, it's a difference in price, obviously, but they really have been gaining quite a bit of market share in the last little while. Last year, both their stock value and their profits surpassed Microsoft. This was something that surprised even me in doing a little bit of research. And I've got sites for all these, so I'm not just making this stuff up. And all those hyperlinks will be available when I upload the slides later. So they surpassed Microsoft in gross sales last year. In the third quarter, they outsold all competitors in the U.S. smartphone market, again with the qualifier being the Android OS was by far tops, but you've got that spread out among disparate vendors and providers, or manufacturers, that is. But they are definitely dominant in that market. And then up until about, well, I guess when the Samsung Galaxy came out, they had about 96% of the tablet market, and that actually did take quite a nosedive at that time. So you're starting to see some market share from other companies, but they're very dominant, as we all know, in the tablet market, at least for the time being. So we've been seeing a huge increase, at the law school. But I want to talk for a minute about, among lawyers, because again, my dean was resistant to the idea of students using them and us letting students use them, because he said it's all fine and well. They want to go out there and get the snazzy new MacBook or an iPad, but they're going to get out into practice and they're going to be at a disadvantage because it's a Windows world out there. Well, I think that's been changing too. iPhone and iPad use in particular has really been soaring, and you need only look into the blogosphere to prove that. There are a number of attorneys around the country who have started blogs dedicated solely to how lawyers are using the iPhone and iPad. There's a great book out by, I believe his name is Tom Miguel, called iPad in 1 Hour for Lawyers. It's actually in the ABA bookstore. And if some of you, I don't know if any of you librarians out there maybe have it in your collections, but I highly recommend getting it. It's a very helpful guide, and I've just sort of thumbed through it, but it would go a long way to helping some of the people that are a little bit more nervous about adopting the technology warm up to it, I think. Then you've also got just the laptop usage increasing. Now, granted, I couldn't really find a good citation that I felt comfortable quoting, but anecdotally among my own faculty, I know that when they talk to practicing attorneys and interface with those folks, I've heard that, oh yeah, every time I go and meet with an attorney, they've got a new MacBook. Why can't I get a MacBook? And that was how it sort of started creeping into our own faculty at Carolina, was they were going out and meeting with their friends and colleagues outside of academia, and they were seeing more and more, especially with the MacBook Air, because before the iPad came out, of course, it was very lightweight and portable. And among law firm IT folks, you're seeing a shift. A couple years ago, do all of you know what ILTA is? It's sort of the equivalent of CALI for law firms. It's the International Legal Technology Association, I guess. And they're not really as welcoming to outside folks as we are. I tried to inquire about membership, or even if you're a law school or a clinic, I think you can get in, but it's really more for practicing lawyers and IT people at firms. But in any case, they had a big presence at Legal Tech New York, which is one of the two big trade shows that they do every year. And last January, before the money ran out for travel, I went up to New York City and went to that trade show, went to that conference, because I thought, you know what, it would be interesting to see how this compares to CALI and what the mood is and how it is to mingle among law firm IT people. I wasn't angling for a job. I was happy where I was, but I just was curious. And frankly, I felt like a fish out of water. I mean, I really did. It's not nearly as a collegial group of people as you all are. Much more stuffy. $5 coat check. It was just insanely huge, too. It was in New York at one of the big hotels in the 50s blocks, and there were so many. The trade show floor alone was kind of like National Educause, if you've ever been to that. It's like a football field or more worth of vendors, and many of them were doing e-discovery, which was another thing we haven't really done much of at the law school. So I felt a little bit out of my element, but I did pick up this annual survey that ILTA did. This is cited off the web, and I actually found a PDF copy of it. But they do an annual survey to talk about what case management software are you using, what document management systems are you using, et cetera, et cetera. And I found the survey that talked about law firm IT people just warming up to Apple technology in general, and they're seeing their attorneys ask for iPhones and iPads and somewhat less MacBooks, and they're having to support them and incorporate them into their enterprise environments, and so that's another bit of a shift from the past. Even judges are adopting iPads. I read an interesting article there at lawyertechreview.com about how even some of the more conservative judges that were adverse to other attempts at bringing technology into their courtrooms have really been warming up to it and seeing them as useful devices for presenting evidence. There's a great app called Exhibit A, which a lot of litigators are using now. And it's amazing to me that even in the last couple years since I did my little spiel at Baltimore, how the tide keeps shifting. So what about at Carolina Law? Well, we do an annual tech survey, or we did up until last year. I don't know why. It was actually done through the Law Librarian. I didn't really have a hand in authoring it, although my colleague Steve Melamed, who I'm sure some of you know, used to issue it, and then they did it online last year, in 2009, that is. And you can see, obviously, just the massive increase. Now, I'm not going to take any credit for that, but I think it would have happened anyway. But I think the fact that my IT department was very welcoming to the Mac students and word got out that we were happy to support them, I think that helped. People knew that if they came, they would have adequate support. And in fact, a couple of my colleagues are here, but Erin Adair has done a lot of sort of frontline support. And I think she's been wonderful in playing that role of sort of a first point of presence for the students with laptops, although we do see a lot fewer students coming in for help with Macs than we do with PCs, and I'll get to that in a minute. So we've covered lawyers and students. What about faculty? This here is my friend Deborah Gerhardt. Professor Gerhardt is an copyright and intellectual property attorney or faculty member, and she was my first user. When I got there, she was not even fully tenure track. She was actually on an appointment through the university library system, and she was overseeing this intellectual property initiative. But in any case, she's just a Mac fanatic. And so I sort of found my early champion in her, and plus she's just a really cool lady, and we get along really well. And so she was my early adopter and sort of my champion. And I think over the years in doing academic IT, I have often found it to be true that if you can find that one person, or two people, or three, even better, that really appreciates a new technology and is not afraid to use it and is willing to work with you on how to make it be useful in a pedagogical way, then that's really going to help you sell it to the other faculty. It kind of goes without saying, but it has helped me over the years. So Deborah has been great, but that was back in 2007 when I first got there. In 2008, in the spring, again, when money was still flowing in the state of North Carolina, the dean gave a one-time infusion to faculty professional development. He said that around March of that year, look, we've got some carryover funds. We want to get rid of them. You can use it on technology. And so out of the roughly 40-some faculty we had at that time, about a quarter of them, I would say, 10 users I think total, came to me and wanted MacBooks. And that was a huge surprise. I mean, they were given the opportunity to buy through the campus purchasing program, which was all Lenovo's laptops. And they came to me almost sheepishly, a few of them, and said, "Are we allowed to get Macs?" And this is again where our associate dean was resistant to the idea of it, but she at that point had capitulated somewhat, and so we helped out 10 users, got MacBooks, and now in 2010, as of the end of last year, really, you see the huge leap in numbers. Again, this includes iPad users, and there is a little bit of crossover. Some of the folks that have MacBooks also have iPads now, but I'm seeing folks that had never been Mac users in the past adopting the iPad as a great tool for travel, for research, and for reading. They love it as an e-reader, which you could say, well, there's other e-readers. Why the iPad? But that seems to be what they like. And who knows? A year out from now, I think it'll only increase. We've already had 2 of our new tenure-track faculty who we just hired have in their hiring agreements, which get forwarded to me when we're working out what they're going to get in terms of technology. 2 of them have asked for Macs. The ones that negotiate a little harder get a laptop in addition to a desktop, and so they have asked for MacBooks as well. So we really see a major shift in the landscape. All right, so for those of you that are sort of doing support, that was a lot of what I covered in Baltimore, and tried to talk about some of the pros versus cons. And I was going to be a little glib when I first did this slide. I was going to do pros on one side and cons on the other, and then as I was typing it up, I was having a hard time coming up with cons, and so I was going to keep doing pros and just sort of, be a little tease about it. But there are definitely some cons, and I'll try to cover both of those to be fair. I think one of the biggest support issues or pros for me that I like about Apple is that, you're dealing with one vendor. Hardware and software is consistent. It's, you're not going to deal with multiple makes and models. There are a few flavors of Mac laptop, obviously, but as far as the student support side of it, which we do a lot of, we don't farm them out to main campus like the law school used to do. It's just easier in so many ways when they come in with a MacBook. It's not an Acer or a Toshiba or a this or a that. And even though most of our students do tend to go through that campus purchasing program, and buy the Lenovo models, it still seems to be easier when it comes to that consistency factor. Obviously, very little malware, almost no viruses. Now, having said that, maybe some of you heard about this Mac Defender thing that happened a couple months ago, so I want to put that out there, full disclosure. There was a phishing scam where if people hit a certain website, it would download a zip file in Safari, and if you had Safari set to automatically open safe files, there's a little checkbox in general preferences for that, then it would open the zip, and then it would install some malware that would pop up with those really obnoxious messages that we see so often on Windows laptops that say, your computer might have been compromised, please install this software. And that was just a ruse to get people to enter their credit card information. So again, it wasn't a Trojan, it was just malware, and it installed this little phishing scam. But other than that, in the nearly 15 odd years that I've been doing this, I can't even remember the last time I saw malware on a Mac. It's just so rare. There were some Word macros back in the day that got corrupted one time, but it's just so rare. And I'll tell you, so much of the laptop support that we do is students coming in with viruses and malware on their laptops. And it's time-consuming, and it's frustrating to us and to them, but with Macs, we don't see it. The built-in VPN in Snow Leopard was a big plus for us as well. We have a campus environment that if you're accessing resources from off campus, such as shared network drives and such, you've got to tunnel in on a VPN. And the campus happens to use a Cisco VPN client. And when Snow Leopard came out, if you go into your network preferences, just like you can set up additional Ethernet connections or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, it had a built-in VPN client, which was easier to configure, frankly, than the Cisco VPN install client, which we have at UNC. So it made it easier to support student orgs and the journals when they wanted to access their G drives from off campus. We said, okay, well, you just got to set up the VPN, go in, connect first using that, and then just type your path or go to Go server, which, for those of you that use Macs, you know what that is, but it's easy to connect in through that VPN client. Easier and faster setup time and configuration time. When I get these laptops for faculty, generally my team handles laptop setup, but since I order all the Macs for people, I do that setup myself, and it's just, I can turn them over very quickly. Again, there's not a lot of updates to run when you get it out of the box. There's not a lot of additional software that they need other than Microsoft Office for Mac, which we license at Carolina. And it's just efficient and fast and a pretty smooth process. Same thing goes for updates, both OS and software updates. Again, a lot of the stuff that comes bundled with the Mac, there's a program just like Windows Update called Software Updates, and it runs, by default, I believe it runs once a week. And it's just efficient, easy. The users themselves don't need to ask a lot of questions about it. One of the things I get asked a lot by faculty is, which Windows Update should I install on my home computer? I mean, we have a controlled environment at work, for the most part, for Windows Updates, but they get flustered when they're at home and they see you've got 15 updates and they don't know whether they should pick and choose or not. I've never had a problem with a Mac update, whether it be an OS update, a security update, or an iMovie or something like that that's Apple software. So that's been very helpful. Let's go to some of the cons, to be fair. There is no native version of OneNote. I've seen a few people out here at the conference taking notes with Microsoft OneNote. And students at our law school, I know a lot of the PC users really live and die by it. It seems to have gained in popularity over the last few years. It's a great note-taking and organizational app that's part of the Microsoft Office for Windows suite, but they've just never included it, even with Office 2010 for Mac, which finally has Outlook and a really outstanding Outlook client. OneNote was not a part of that. Now, just recently, in this quarter, they released the iPad and iPhone version of OneNote. But you're still not seeing, at least we're not seeing, a lot of students in class with iPads trying to take notes. That's still mainly a laptop thing. And so other than that, there's really no way to emulate that. Now, having said that, the students, being the enterprising folks that they are, they found alternatives. And one of them is an application called Notebook by Circus Ponies. It's a popular app among our Mac-using students. We have a lot of folks adopting that. I think it's nominal cost. Do you know, Ben, if it's free or? Yeah. Evernote has gained in popularity too. Yeah, exactly. So there are other apps now that are out there for Mac, but just wanted to make mention of the fact no OneNote. Pharos configuration. How many of you are using Pharos for pay-to-print services at your schools? Okay, so we've got a handful. We do too at Carolina, and that's centrally managed by auxiliary services, by campus services, but we have our own law school print queue because the volume was just so huge that we needed to set up separate queues. And we found that the configuration file for the Pharos queues, there were the regular Pharos queues and then there were the law school specific queues. The folks at Campus Services were kind enough to write an EXE file for us that installed both queues. So all the Windows users just downloaded that from our internal website, My Carolina Law, installed it, and they were good to go. For the Mac users, we had to write up, verbose instructions for how to go about it. You got to click on the toolbar in your print dialog box and add the advanced gear button, and then choose here and do this. And if it's 10.5, then do that. And if it's 10.6, OS 10.6, do that. So I just wanted to admit to the fact that Pharos configuration can be a little bit trickier. Erin has told me that she spends some of her time doing that. Yeah.
You can actually put your configuration file into the executable on Mac, and it'll install the same way. There's instructions with my Pharos.
That's great. I'd love to talk to you because we have not had, since the folks on Central Campus do the Pharos work, we've been at the tail end of that equation, but that's good to know. Thank you.
Where is that?
On the Pharos website, you said?
Yeah, if you go to the Pharos website, look at it, they will tell you how to do it. I've done it before.
That's interesting. I mean, I know there's the DMG file at the Pharos website for the...
You actually changed, you modified the DMG.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks for mentioning that. That's good information. One thing related to that, though, is we had found a lot of errors were getting thrown. We use HP 9050 series laser jets for our Pharos queues. And it wasn't just the Macs that was doing it. It was both Windows and Mac computers. But it was this aggravating problem. There were these fatal stop error messages on the printers. There was a little bit of chatter about this on Technoids about a year ago. And I polled some folks to see what they had done to address it. And I know my buddy Wayne over at Duke was tearing his hair out too. But basically, it would throw a stop error message when somebody would print a large PDF file. And you'd have to reboot the printer and take the network cable out. It was a real nightmare. And we had found that rather than using the default HP printer drivers, the Gutenprint drivers, the open source Gutenprint drivers work a whole lot better, in my experience at least, for the Mac. And again, your mileage may vary. It may be that I see some nodding of heads. It may be that if you're using different printer infrastructure, it doesn't matter as much. But we had now advised all our Mac using students to go ahead and install the Gutenprint drivers, which actually I think they come pre-installed in Snow Leopard, but it's easy to find them online if you just Google Gutenprint OS X. And that's another little tip for those that are seeing an increase in the user base. Just like just like Gutenberg, yeah, Gutenprint. Yeah, Mac actually, Apple's support page has a link directly on support.apple.com for the OS 10.6 drivers, I think, and then for earlier ones, you can just go to Gutenprint at SourceForge. So there's no native version of WordPerfect. No Snickers, please. I mean, I don't know how many people use WordPerfect where you guys are. We still have some dedicated WordPerfect people. I see some rolling of eyes and nodding of heads. Yeah. The last upgrade we did was X3, but we haven't gone to X4 or 5. Well, we got limited numbers of X4, and nobody's gone to X5. But anyway, again, it's a file format compatibility issue. If you get a WPD file and you're a Mac person like Deborah Gerhardt, who I showed earlier, sometimes they come flustered. I can't open this file from a student, or usually it's from another faculty member. But again, there are a lot of tools out there that you can use. NeoOffice, which is sort of the Mac branch of the Open Office project, is good for that. And another site, which some of you may know, is zamzar.com, ZAMZAR.com. It's a great file conversion website. And of course, there's paid versions, but the free version of it works really well. You can feed any file type in, a .doc, .wpd, .jpeg. There's any number of files you can feed into it, and it spits back out multiple different file formats. So that's another useful tool if you get stuck with a Mac student or faculty member trying to get a WordPerfect file open.
Sorry, what was the name of that?
It's Zamzar, ZAMZAR.com. Yep. This last one is more about, may vary from campus to campus. Up until recently, we had one guy on the entire UNC campus who was an Apple certified tech. They've now trained up all the guys that work at the main computer repair center, and so they've got 4 or 5 guys on campus, or maybe just 2 or 3 now, who are Apple certified. Partly that was just due to the huge increase in the undergraduate population who were toting Macs, but it's helped us out because we don't do in-house warranty or hardware repair. My friend Dennis Bishop out at Oregon, who could not be here, they do. They've actually trained some guys in-house, or gals, I'm not sure, to do warranty repair. And you get a kickback from Apple. You get discounts on parts, or they pay you somehow to do the repairs on their behalf. Not quite sure how that works. But, up until recently, at least for us, if it were a hardware issue, we'd have to send them out to the Apple store, which luckily we have one in the Raleigh-Durham area, Chapel Hill area. So, but that's something to consider as well. Any questions at this point?
Do you find you have very many Apple repairs?
No, we haven't. I mean, but I won't say that I've never seen them. We have gotten a couple lemons, and it's just like buying a car. I mean, sometimes you get a bad Toyota or a bad Lexus, it's just, but the numbers of them that we've seen are very low.
Are students typically buying Apple Care, or?
That's a good question. I don't know on the student side. When I buy faculty laptops, I always, without fail, get the 3-year APP, they call it, the Apple Protection Plan. It's just like, it's what you already get usually with a Dell or a Lenovo. I mean, typically the PC vendors are giving you that 3 to 4 year care. With the students at Carolina, they give them a 4-year plan for undergrads. But yeah, I always buy the Apple Protection Plan. And for a laptop, that's an extra $199. I would hope. We encourage them to, but I don't have any evidence. So, yeah. We're not. Yeah, we're not joining them to our domain. There's the faculty laptops that are their secondary computers. Yeah, we're not. We've got one. Getting back to my good buddy Deborah, she finally broke down when it was time for her life cycle refresh. She said, "Please don't get me a PC this time. Can I just get a Mac?" And I said, "Well, get you a Mac Mini, and we could hook up a nice big Lenovo monitor so nobody knows." Yep, exactly. And I'm going to get into that a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, exactly. We do that, and for security and. The CIFS and SMB support is really strong, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But in terms of Active Directory domain policy and all that, and getting them joined to the network, that's not a route that I've gone down just because we don't have enough users who are actually in need of it. But there is a product out there called Extreme ZIP. I forget the vendor, but it's like Extreme. It looks like Extreme Zip, but they have a really good product for incorporating Macs into AD directories and AD domain environments. And you also have to work with the people on campus that are running your Active Directory domain if you're not running it yourself, because there's some additional metadata and stuff like that you have to enable. What's that? They are, and I'll show you in a minute how they do that, yeah. So, bonus features. This goes a little bit past the pros and cons argument. The App Store, I'm sure you've all heard of the App Store, but do those of you who are less familiar maybe know that the App Store is not just for the iPad and the iPhone, that there's now the App Store for Apple desktops. I have not really explored it much myself, but I was fiddling around in the last few days prepping for this presentation and saw that the number 6 top seller, paid item, not a free download, but the number 6 top seller in the App Store for desktops and laptops is something called Law Documents by Walsburg Software. And it's got, rules of federal procedure and statutes and all these other things, Constitution. And I was really impressed by that, kind of struck by that even outside the iPad, iPhone environment, there are folks developing legal apps that are finding some footing. iCloud, you've probably heard about that. Good old Steve in the Worldwide Developers Conference a couple weeks ago made the announcement. it's going to be where you store all your music, but what I was thinking of it more as a possible solution for students is to back up their Evernote files or back up their PDFs and things of that nature. So that situation where somebody at lunch was telling me they had a student come to them like a week before her graduation 3L whose hard drive died, and she had 0 backups. And you want to just strangle them on the one hand, but you also feel you want to break into tears on the person's behalf. And so, I'm thinking that iCloud might be a possible solution for folks using Macs in that regard, just backing up their documents and whatnot, not just their iTunes libraries. Real quick, I also wanted to mention in the iOS environment, in the iPad and iPhone environment, some of the great apps have already been mentioned. Evernote is sort of an organizational minder, manage all your notes and your appointments and everything, and that's really gained a lot of traction. There's something called Lost Stack. There's AJI Annotator, which is to annotate PDFs, and then there's Dropbox, of course, has an app now, and Exhibit A, which is the thing I mentioned earlier that they're using in trial situations. And then, you may think, so what? I mean, iLife, law students don't have a lot of time to be, experimenting with GarageBand and doing mashups and or making movies. But I still think, for the dollar, iMovie is still the best consumer movie editing software out there. Yeah, you can do Microsoft Movie Maker or whatever, and there's obviously a lot of other products out there. But for the price, I mean, iMovie is an incredibly powerful tool. If you were doing trial advocacy practice or any kind of other thing that involved video and you wanted to do editing, it's a great tool and it's very useful. And or organizing photos that are evidence, you could use iPhoto in that regard. So I'm just trying to think outside the box. But again, these are tools that are just native to Apple. So some tips, tools, and tricks that we've learned over the years supporting Macs. Remote desktop connection, Microsoft Remote Desktop Connection works great. For a while, I was a big fan of this alternative. It's an open source project called Cord, spelled with a little O, and everything else is capital. It's not a typo. That's a really solid alternative. It's got a nice little user interface.
Before we can do too far past,
yeah.
How have you been doing purchasing via the App Store for your faculty? Just doing redeem codes, reimbursing?
There's that. Apple announced a while back that they had an authorized purchasing bulk program available. And I saved the email and made a note to go back to it, and I never looked into it. I'm an authorized purchaser, so I can go into the Apple Store and purchase with like my P card or with a check request or a PO. But for apps, that's a good question. I have no idea. I think, honestly, every individual faculty member who buys an iPad with their professional development money, they consider it almost like a personal device, and they're paying for their own apps. I haven't been asked. I haven't been told I need to, and so that's not something that's come up. But there is a volume purchasing program for higher ed for apps, if you want to buy in bulk for your institution or your organization. Yeah, because you got to tie it. That's the other thing about setting up iPads. Maybe I should have thrown this into the cons, or at least made a note about the setup time. With the iPad, when you do the setup, you immediately have to tie it, and this is not true of a MacBook, but you immediately have to tie it to your iTunes account. I can't do that. I'm not going to put in my personal credentials and my credit card information for X, Y, and Z faculty member. So I always just have them come by the office. It doesn't take but an extra minute. And, some of them were a little leery at first. I said, it's just like if you have iTunes at home and you ever want to download something or purchase something, you're going to need to have your information eventually. So after that, they were fine with it. But that's just one little extra catch. So in terms of remote desktop, it's really easy to do if you do have an environment where the primary PC is a Windows box and they need access to it from outside the office and they elect to get a MacBook, no problem. One of the most common questions I got asked in that first wave of purchases. And again, Microsoft has kept the RDC client current for Mac, but this Cord project is a nice interface, a little different, and it works great as well. Both of them can be used with or without VPN if you want a little bit more security. Again, I mentioned this earlier, so I won't retread it, but there's the link for those of you that you're curious. And again, I'll upload these to CALI so you have these embedded URLs. But the Gutenprint drivers work especially well in a Pharos environment. Time Machine is a built-in application that does automated backups to an external drive. Not rocket science, not anything magical really, but it's a cool interface, and you kind of get this, if you want to go back to a previous version, you kind of get this cool Star Wars looking view like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I had a file that I need to retrieve, and you can pull it back that way. I'll admit I don't use Time Machine. I use a little package called Super Duper, which is like $30, and it's just really helpful to me. I back up our X server, or actually a Mac server with it, and I just use it on my personal laptop. But Time Machine is great, and it works really well. So getting to the network file share issue, CIFS and SMB are fully supported, and we recently moved from one network file server environment to network attached storage with central ITS, and it's a NetApp, and all the faculty, when they log into their Windows PC, through group policy scripting, they get an H drive, their home drive, and then they get access to a G drive. If they're in the clinic, they'll get G:clinic. If they're in career services, it's G career services, etc. So that's how we control all our drive mappings, is through group policy. Well, because we're not joining the Macs to the domain, that may be an issue. So basically, all you need to do is configure a little script, which actually maybe let me bounce that. Well, I'm going to show you at the end just so I don't lose my flow. But there's a way to write an Apple script, very easy. It's like 4 lines of code, and you can save it as a little shortcut on the desktop. That's what I've done for my faculty, so that if they need to connect to their network drives, all they got to do is click on that. It prompts for their domain credential, type it in, boom, they've got their share. Same thing from off campus. As long as they tunnel in with the VPN, they can then launch that script and it'll work because they've got an on-campus IP address, and it knows what that path definition is to the file server. It does not, however, for those of you who get a little bit more technical, does not support DFS, distributed file system. So, for instance, like our file system, it used to be ASNT1 and ASNT2/law/whatever. But there was an alias to that, which was just our domain name, ad.law.unc or whatnot. Well, everybody on the Windows machines always just took the shortcut, ad.unc. But on the Mac, you've actually got to type the name of the server, so you can't have that DFS support where if one of the file servers is down, it'll pick up the other one. You actually have to spell out the path, ASNT domain 1 or whatever the name of the server is. So they've not quite gotten there, but we'll be curious to see whether in the next OS 10 and Lion, when it comes out, whether they've got DFS support. Any questions about that, since somebody was asking earlier how we do that? I'll show you that little script at the end. I'm happy to share the code.
Those scripts would work pretty good for laptop. The scripts do work well.
Yeah.
We use those too. There's some of the Macs that we have actually in the office. Just go ahead and log that in.
Put it as an automatic thing? Exactly. If you have a permanent connection on a hard wire, then you're good to go. It's just mostly I do it for laptop users. Grab is the name of an Apple program. It's just under Applications Utilities. It's a great little screenshot program. I can't tell you how often I use it if I'm trying to send a faculty member instructions on how to do something or how to navigate a program. And it's just, its icon is a little pair of scissors. And you can do screen selection. You can do the whole window, the whole desktop. And you can do timed screen capture. It's really slick, and it's just a simple little utility. Or I discovered about 6 months ago, I'm embarrassed to admit, it took me that long, Shift Command 3. That's a screenshot, and it works great.
Shift Command 4.
I did Shift Command 3.
They both do it.
One is the selection, and one is the whole deal, right? Gotcha. Thank you. I knew there were permutations of it, but again, that's admittedly a newer thing for me, but I've been using it more often. Thanks for the catch. And finally, for you Unix geeks out there, Terminal, which is, OS 10 is built on a Unix core, basically, and if you want to do some scripting or some more advanced types of things, generally we don't have to do that in our support environment at the law school, but if you're helping a user or trying to do other functions, then Terminal is a very powerful command line tool. And again, it's just under Applications Utilities. For my money, again, in my humble opinion, the best antivirus software that I have found is something called Clam XAV. Now, having said that, ask me if I bother to run it. When people ask me, I tell them, oh, yeah, Clam XAV. And then they'll say, is that what you use? And I say, yeah, I have it installed. But I honestly don't have it automated to where it's running at boot up or anything. Now, it may have gotten better in the past few years, but I have found in the past Norton and then Symantec AV products were just resource hogs. I hated them on my Mac. It just dragged everything down. Even though I'm fine with the Windows version, I got no beef with Symantec. I think they make great stuff. But the Mac versions were painful. And so I found this. It's, it's another SourceForge project. But I don't know how long it'll be out there, how long it'll be alive. But I just updated it last night, and it seems to be active. So. How have you felt about that? Has it been? Mm-hmm. Good. Good. Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. That's great. Yeah. Our campus is in bed with Symantec at this point, but yeah.
Emory is actually getting ready to do a review of our university-wide antivirus because we have been using Symantec, and it's just with every iteration, it's become more and more difficult to use. And the Symantec client, which we're actually required to use on our Macs, which are going to a different the Symantec client is very heavy. I mean, even you still notice it.
Yeah. I've just never had great luck with it, so that's the little tool that I found. I thought if somebody asked, I'd at least put it out there. And finally, Windows Media Files. I was just at the session that I think his first name is, from Rutgers did about encoding and wrappers and all this stuff involved with video editing and production. And, I used to be frustrated trying to play WMV files on my Mac until I discovered this cool little utility called Flip for Mac. I think it used to be independent. I think, did Microsoft buy them? Who bought them? Some larger video company bought them up. But you can still find it. It's a free download. Just plugs into your browser, and it ends up in your system preferences window, and you can adjust things, and it's a great little tool. Yes. We use that actually in our labs on the classrooms on the Windows side, but I hadn't thought about trying it on the Macs. Cool.
You can also get Librarian that plugs into QuickTime and does basically what VLC does, and it plays everything through QuickTime, so it's not like, oh, I have to remember to open this.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Parian.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I'm not familiar with that one. I've gone about 40-some minutes, and that's the end of my spiel. Any other general questions? Or?
If you can check your email, I think it's a link to that. The Pharos.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, admittedly, we're a Windows shop. We have a Windows print server, and the only way we found to be able to get Macs to print is first you have to find that advanced button, which I don't know why it's not there by default.
It's annoying, yeah.
Use SMB, and then it stores their username, Active Directory username, and password in clear text. You know how to find it. You can't find it.
Ben may have a response. I don't have a response to that because we're in a little bit different.
LPD support on your Windows print servers, and then configure the Macs in what they really want to use, which is LPD.
Right.
Yeah, that's how we do it.
But I'm not so sure we could do that with like
pCounter does support it, and we run it that way. Actually, you have to turn on the LPD, not the Microsoft LPD server, but the pCounter LPD server.
We just give them the bare, like SMB hat, the printer share, and let them authenticate, and save it on their own computer. So, like, save it in the key chain.
We, for better or worse, are letting the few number of faculty who want to print from their Macs just do direct IP printing. So, I mean, it's not, we don't do a print server, we don't do counts and quotas or anything. So it's a little bit looser environment where we are, but that's good point.
But you can also, in 10.6, script the installs. There's actually a command line tool for adding
Right.
You can just be like, oh yeah, just add this command, and you can package it up in like an automator build, and just be like, here's this, double click on it,
Yeah.
and then it'll pop up a message saying, hey, we're done.
That's good. Oh man, I might want to talk to you guys about that one. Yeah, that's the benefit of this. You get to learn more than you present sometimes. Anything else? Yeah.
As this wave sort of continues, have you thought about how you're going to deal with classroom computers if you start getting requests for ALM? Same thing in the classroom I have in my office, staff computers.
Yeah, we've got our new assistant dean for communications starting August 1st, and I just got her hiring agreement that the dean forwarded me, and she wants a Mac desktop and a MacBook. And Katie, my friend who was her predecessor, she had a MacBook, but she still had the Windows PC because she was all tied into the environment. I've been resistant to making it the primary, the sole PC, even for faculty, because of the fact that we're not running Extreme ZIP or any of these AD tie-in apps or enterprise-level kind of third-party tools. And we rely so heavily on Active Directory group policy to control our environment. And again, I'm not just one of these, religious Mac versus PC guys. I mean, a lot of what we do at the law school at Carolina is Windows-based. Don't get me wrong. But I think that it's going to be difficult to make that the primary PC in any kind of widespread way. But I guess we're just going to have to take it on a case-by-case basis is my best answer for that. I hate, on the one hand, it's good to have policies and make sure that everybody gets the same treatment, but getting back to my friend Deborah Gerhardt, she just was like, I really don't want a new PC. Can you just give me a Mac? And I thought about it and was like, sure. What harm is it going to be? And she's so much happier. And for me, it's all about the end user. And frankly, she's probably going to be less of a thorn in our side now than she was when she had this PC that she hated. So.
I was just wondering, just sort of wanting to poll the audience, our undergrad side in all the public labs is now replacing the previous Dells with the 27-inch iMacs with boot camp and a boot manager, so that you've got your choice of booting to Windows or booting to Mac OS. Are other people doing that? Is that becoming a common thing for public labs? Not at the law schools, but undergrad.
In our math lab, we have that option, but we'll never get rid of.
Pure PCs.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only place on campus at UNC that I did it was at my grad program at SILS, at the School of Information Library Science. But they still have a Dell lab as well. But they put a number of PC or Macs out with boot camp on them. Yeah.
I'm from ASU, but a lot of the undergrad schools, a lot of the undergrad areas, they're buying these iMacs and they're just running Windows on them. Like, that's ridiculous. You're spending $1,000 more.
Yeah. That I don't get. Exactly. The boot camp thing I get, but just doing it because it's better hardware, I don't. Yeah.
I'd say that the PC computers that we have students access are used a lot by the Mac students for those specific programs that they can't get on their Mac. So for special programs. So
Well, in that regard, yeah, in that respect, it's interesting that came up because we're just now launching an initiative. I've been interested in VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, over the last year, and that's another area that I'm trying to focus on this coming year. And we recently found out that Research Computing at Carolina, the Central IT Research Computing Group, has set up a virtual computing lab, vcl.unc.edu, and you can log in if you're a student and register for an hour session or whatever you need. And there's all these different images if you need SAS or SPSS or ArcGIS and all these specialized applications. So for our clinic students who up until now have used Time Matters and have struggled with the interface and have struggled getting access to it, we're going to build an image that has all the tools that they need, and they'll be able to log in. Everything will be secure. And so I think virtualization at the desktop level is going to be yet another way. And I tried it on my Mac. I thought the first thing I'm going to do is go to the VCL, try to load the little Cisco client, and make sure that it all works. And it worked like a charm. And there I was sitting running a remote Windows XP machine with some Windows software that I couldn't otherwise have. So. I don't have a need for one that often. I mean, if I do, I'll go to the terminal. I'll go to the command line and just do SSH commands. CyberDuck. I use fetch occasionally. I've had to retrieve some data from a Duke data set, and we had to go through all these legal hoops to get access to it and sign all these security agreements. And I used SFTP, through fetch to download all the data there. That was just recently, now that I think about it. But,
I just had a comment back about the dual booting system. I went to LabMan 2 years ago. I skipped it this year, but one of the things they were talking about there, when they had the Macs there, like the iMacs, students were going up and using them. So what they started doing is kind of like you talked about with your professor. They got the Mac Minis and dual booting those with a regular off-brand monitor, whatever.
yeah,
So people,
it's interesting. Yeah, maybe all about perception. In my office, I was like the faculty. I had my MacBook, and I'd always sit there using my MacBook, but I still had a Lenovo on my desk until last year when it was time to, my own refresh was coming due, and I said, screw it. And I just got a Mac Mini, but left my 22-inch Lenovo. So faculty come into my office all day, and they say, what are those weird little icons? What is that? That's not Windows. Oh, yeah, it's just a monitor hooked to this little white box, and they're always fascinated by it. But, yeah, so, if you have any questions after the fact, just ping me. I'll be uploading the slides. I found in Keynote that there's this cool new beta Keynote website where you can upload them. So I'll try to link to it from the presentation on CALI at the conference site. But otherwise, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
About that script.
Yes, I forgot to show the script. Let's see. Oh, I have it up, but I got to get this back. Let's see. Hey.
I missed I'm John.
Hey, John.
I missed from Hastings.
Okay.
I missed the first part of this. I had a phone call I had to take.
Oh, all right.
So I'm wondering if I emailed you, would it be okay if I got the first?
Yeah.
If you email me the presentation?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind doing that. Like I said, I'm going to upload it to the CALI site.
Oh,
and
are you?
everything.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be available.
Okay.
And I know that they're recording the session. So,
So I can just go
speaking
there.
of,
Right.
turn this off.
coffee, I might go down for